It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Harvesting losses to use for the future.
So what I think is beautiful is we just talked about how capital gains can be distributed in good years. Well, one of the things that happens in bad years is investments go down. And a lot of people say, oh, well, if the investments go down, I don't want to sell those because then I'll lose money. That's actually a common misconception amongst what I would call elementary investors, not financial mutants like you guys.
Well, yeah, because I think that seed gets planted.
Sure.
Because I've seen it from other advisors. You know, when we get a client from another advisor and they come in with embedded loss positions, we'll be like, why do you still hold this? Be like, well, my advisor told me if I haven't sold it, I haven't actually lost anything. I'm like, well, you know, the way we kind of look at gains and losses, we say, what's it worth on January 1st? What's it worth on December 31st? Is it worth more? Is it worth less?
That's how you know.
That's probably a better accounting than, you know, just saying, hey, if we haven't sold it, because what you can do, and this is what Bo's alluding to, if you have a dud, and it's something that, you know, and it doesn't even have to be a dud, to be honest with you. It can just be something that is down. You can go and sell that holding, go redeploy those funds immediately into another holding, and you get to lock in the paper gains, and then you're off to the races on whatever it builds. Now, I know a lot of you, because I've seen it in the comments when we do these, you know, talk about these type of strategies, they go, yeah, but then now you've got a lower basis in that thing you bought into. Well, look, if I can go into, because you remember, we're long-term investors.
Yep.
I don't want you buying and selling a lot of stuff. That's just not where we are. We are long-term. I'm willing to let you go ahead and take that loss today, take the deductible portion, meaning it's going to put money in your pocket by letting you have a deduction on your tax return, and deferring that income on what you reinvest into.
Now, I want to remind you guys that we are not market timers. We don't look at cataclysmic events and think about, oh, well, how can we get in or get out? That's not what we're talking about. But the fourth quarter of 2018 and then COVID provided probably two of the clearest examples of loss harvesting opportunities. So even if you're a passive index investor, and if you saw what happened, like I'll use small cap as an example, during the COVID downturn earlier this year, small cap indices and small cap stocks, they got hammered. Well, if you make the choice to go harvest that loss, what we think makes sense is so that you're not altering the investment strategy. If the holding was worth $10,000 and now it's worth $5,000 and you sell that $5,000 to harvest that loss, it probably makes sense for you to look for a similar type investment in your portfolio and go invest $5,000. Not identical, right? Because then you would run into like wash sale rules, but you want to make sure that it's different enough, but also satisfies that same portion of your portfolio. Because what you don't want to do is say, oh, okay, well, I'm going to sell this small cap that's done really, really well. Ooh, and I see that large cap has done really, really good. I'm going to sell that. I'm going to go buy that. Well, then you're altering your investment philosophy, your portfolio. That's not exactly what you want to be doing.
I do think it's smart. Pay attention to your asset allocation, because that is very important. This is also a strategy you can use for rebalancing too. So it's powerful. Harvesting losses is something, a skill set that you should kind of build as an annual tradition.
Absolutely.
Eventually, it's kind of really looking at 4 and 5 together. Go avoid the tax bombs and make sure you understand what capital gain distributions are coming from the mutual funds, and then also taking advantage of are there any losses in my portfolio that I could actually utilize as a tool.
And if you do this really, really well, again, fourth quarter 2018 COVID, you can use those in future years. So you can actually take those losses, carry them forward. But even if you don't have any capital losses next year, you can use up to $3,000 of that to offset ordinary income, which is really, really exciting. So I don't think there's ever a reason to not harvest losses. Is that too bold of a statement to make?
We like them. I mean, because they really do. Because like, if I can save tax dollars today for the future, I would much rather have the money in hand right now. So take advantage of that. Let's talk about number 6. This is taking advantage of a special charitable tax deduction that's just for 2020. Now,
we did not talk about this in show prep. But I'm curious, because this was one of the things that got added into the legislation this year. I'm trying to figure out why. Like, I'm trying to, sometimes when you think about like tax policy, like what was the purpose of it? I don't know that I fully have the purpose of this figured out, but I think it's kind of awesome that it was added. I think it's a net positive for the country, for the population.
Well, and look, this is where I am a tax nerd.
Yeah.
You guys know we didn't start the show with the typical introduction, but I do have 16 years of doing tax preparation as a CPA. And the reason I love tax law is that you can look and see what the intent was when a law was done. And I think this one is one where, because of the pandemic, we knew a lot of businesses had been hurt. A lot of people were going to be in need. Plus, charities are probably not going to get as much money as they typically do. And we also know back when we passed the new tax legislation in 2017 for 2018 and beyond, because the higher standard deduction, a lot of people no longer do itemized charitable deductions anymore. They don't even really, because we have SALT limitations, we have, all these in the much higher standard deduction. If you give a few $1,000s to your charity, it's probably better still to take the standard deduction. So what they did in 2020 that's so unique is they said, if you don't itemize, if you take the standard deduction because it's gotten so high because of that 2017 legislation, no worries in 2020, because we're going to give you a $300 above the line tax deduction.
Now, above the line, that's some jargon that we're familiar with. What does an above the line deduction mean?
It means that, basically, in simple terms, if you don't have to itemize. They're going to let everybody who files a tax return that does not itemize take up to $300 of charitable deductions in 2020. So if you haven't taken advantage of this, go find your favorite organization and write them a $300 check. And by the way, I thought it was interesting. Typically individuals are half of what married couples are. It's $300. It doesn't matter if you're a single individual, $300. If you're a married couple, $300. So that's the number, is $300.
If you are someone out there who's taking advantage of advanced charitable giving strategies, and perhaps you recognize that the standard deduction is so high now that you do your charitable giving every 2 years, so you actually kind of bundle your contribution so that you can deduct it. If this happens to be your off year, it's crazy not to just think about, okay, I'm going to take $300 and go give it to an organization. Even though I won't itemize it this year and it's not part of my strategy, I still want to get that above the line deduction if you're going to be a standard deductor this year.
That's a great point.
I like to.
Plus it tees
it
it up.
Drop in.
More advanced strategies coming your way and additional steps. Number 7. This might seem elementary, but guys, I'm telling you, this is thousands of dollars potentially. Is go clean your closets and take that additional charitable deduction.
Yeah, one of the things that I try to do, and I don't do it often enough, is we just accumulate stuff. My kids get big and they grow out of stuff, and we don't have the toys, and we just accumulate a lot of stuff. And oftentimes I find myself getting frustrated. There's so much stuff laying around. Yeah. This is a great way to de-stuff your house, but also a great way to help save in your taxes.
Now, this does have the caveat. You do have to itemize to be able to take advantage of this one. But here's what I have found in my own house. And this is more of a time saver, is because I love that my wife, every now and then, pretty much every year, our neighborhood does an annual yard sale. And I see my wife, and by default, I get pulled into it because I'm the professional mover of anything, whether it's clothing, boxes from the attic. I am the hired help to move stuff around.
Now, that's interesting. I've had a lot of stuff that I've needed moved over the years, and I don't know that you've ever come over to help me move stuff. Yeah, Brian, you told me that you don't move stuff.
I don't move stuff.
That just tells me that your wife has much more of a pull on you than I have, I guess.
So here's the point of this, though. Is I have made this point with my wife, and I think she's starting to understand it, is that it is actually because we're in a higher tax bracket. We're in one of the one of the highest tax brackets. It is actually more advantageous and more money in our back pocket instead of selling that clothing, the furniture, or that box of household goods and getting, pennies on the dollar in the yard sale. We actually could get a deduction that could be worth 37 cents on the dollar.
Sure.
I mean, and that's actually a lot of money if you think about what the thrift value of these holdings are, and then when you give them to the charity, you might actually make more money donating your goods to charity than you would selling it on eBay or in a yard sale.
Now, one of the items that is a sense of struggle in my house is my wife sometimes becomes anchored to things that she owns. Like, oh, I bought that jacket in 2009, and oh, no, I can't get rid of it because it's worth this much. And I'm like, well, it's not worth that much potentially. And so one of the things we have to talk about is, okay, if we are going to do this, we have to be able to quantify what things are worth, because my wife might think something is worth more than what it's actually worth, or certainly more than what we could deduct for it. But don't worry, there are tools out there that can help.
Yeah, we always when I did taxes, I typically use thrift value. And if you want to know, well, how am I supposed to know thrift value? Good news is there's actually tools out there.
Right.
Here's Goodwill has a valuation tool that they have on their website. The other one is that all Goodwill, or was some of that Salvation Army?
I think
one's
Salvation Army, the other one's
so
Goodwill.
Goodwill's on the left, and then Salvation Army's on the right, and that will give you. I always found that very valuable. Now, here's the thing: to maximize this deduction, you do need to document. You need to actually create probably a nerdy little spreadsheet or something like that. There's even tools. Intuit has some tools as part of their TurboTax, basket of fun things that you could actually use for tracking charitable contributions, including donating of clothes.
I'll go ahead and tell you,
goods.
one of the practices that I've put into place, it is much easier. If you're someone who takes stuff to like Goodwill or Salvation Army throughout the year, you don't just do it at the end of the year. Inventorying that stuff throughout the year instead of on April 14th trying to go figure it all out will make your life much easier. It's as easy as just keeping a spreadsheet, dropping the stuff on the spreadsheet, saving the receipt. It's not more difficult than that. But you just got to be organized.
Well, it is, and you just alluded to like April 14th is going to be too late. You've got to do this stuff by year end. That's why we put it in the show. So think about it in calendar year terms, January through December. Get the money, get the donations in there, so you get the benefit and the money in your pocket.
Love it.